Hello, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I am back with another Bronte sister. This is The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. I have a really hard time pronouncing that, but it is by Anne Bronte, our first of Anne Bronte. It will also be our last. She's written other books, but I'm just again focusing on the big ones that most people know about her in like standard collection sets. And I have started it, and I think I'm 20% of the way through. So I'm not gonna like try to go too much into the plot right now, but I do kind of want to like give a little bit of an introduction to it. So, from what I understand, it's probably a story of abuse. Because that seems to be the theme here for a lot of the books by the Bronte sisters. Overall, what is happening with the plot? You start with this guy named Gilbert, who is our narrator for right now. If I understand correctly, I think he is the narrator for like the first half of the book, and then it switches to a different narrator. But I don't know that for sure, but I'm pretty sure that's how it is. Anyways, so we're getting his perspective of things. And also Leo is playing with the blind, so if you hear any noises, that's what that is. And so he is giving his... Oh, wow. Okay, well, he's really going through something right now. But you're getting his perspective of things, and it starts off with him kind of he's kind of writing a letter to someone, but basically he's a farmer, but he's like a gentleman's father, so I'm guessing he is land owning and is in the middle class of, I assume, the Victorian age, but he is like still someone who works. He's not like the wealthy side of the middle class. He's not like that upper part per se. And he finds out about this tenant who is kind of mysterious. They don't know her. They kind of spy on her a little bit in a way, and all of the town is like whispering and being like, "Did you hear this new Mrs. Graham? Blah 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 blah." And he does eventually meet her, and then he kind of starts to develop feelings for her, even though she's kind of made it clear, like, "Hey, I don't want anything," but he is determined, and he's like, "Well, we could just be friends." So, he's trying to wiggle his way in there. And she also does have a son named Arthur. I think he's probably like, I would assume a toddler, although I don't know that for sure. And that kind of like makes it a little questionable. She's this single woman with a child in this old Gothic house. Like, that's very suspicious. So that's why there's a lot of rumors circulating. The latest rumor is that she is in a relationship with the, I guess, landlord of the tenant that she's at. So, like, that's the latest rumor, but who's to say if that's true or not? It's kind of leaning towards that it might be true, but we don't know the whole story. There's a lot of, like, he's trying to get to know her, but she has a mysterious past, and she hasn't really given anything away there. And her first name is Helen. That's just kind of where we're at with this book. I am really, really tired. I meant to film this actually not long after I got home so I could use some of the sunlight to have some nice lighting, but that didn't happen. The sun's like actively going down. And I am job searching. I have been job searching for a few months, but I'm really like focusing in on it a lot more now that I don't have grad school. And that's just exhausting. Like, that's such a... I'm not going to go too much into that just because it's like no one wants to listen to that. But like, if you're someone who's job searching or has job searched recently, it is such an exhausting process. There is so much emotional labor that goes into it because you constantly have to try to believe in yourself and your skills when you keep getting denied or you keep getting ghosted, and you just have to keep telling yourself like, no, like, I'm good, I'm worthy, I can do this work, I can keep applying, like, I will make sure I get noticed. And that's so exhausting to constantly advocate for yourself despite the fact that you keep getting hit with blows that say that you're not worthy and that you're not good enough, even though that's not really what it's saying, because there's so much politics that goes into hiring anyone. Like, there's so much that happens behind the scenes that we as people seeking jobs will never see. And I know this from like watching a company try to hire someone. Like, there's been really great candidates who haven't been hired, and sometimes it's because of their own means, and sometimes it's outside of their control, and it's just like, it's such a messy process. So if you're going through that or you have gone through that recently, I feel you. And I'm just gonna kind of leave it there. I'm gonna try not to dread too much in the job searching for this video because that's not really what I want this to be. But I did kind of want to like give that caveat. But yeah, so maybe what I really need to make everything feel a little bit more okay and for me to get some rest on some level is to just read a gothic novel where there may or may not be domestic abuse. That's exactly what I'm here for. Okay, so I do have an update with the book. I think I'm about halfway through with it, and where we left off was with Gilbert and him kind of speculating about Helen or Mrs. Graham's past. And we've reached a point where she actually was like, you know what? Here's my diary. You make your own opinion. And I'm like, dang, okay. So now we're like going through and we're reading basically her diary or her journal throughout her meeting who will be her husband, Mr. Huntington. So I think like the first part of the journal was really interesting to me because you're able to see their connection and how they met. So that was very gripping for me. And then now that we're in the marriage phase, it's not as like engaging, but I'm still intrigued. I'm still enjoying it. I just think I've hit a little bit of a slump, but I think we're starting to kind of like back out of the slump, which will be nice. But so far, like, I get the kind of gothic themes that are happening, especially earlier in the book before we went to her diaries. You can see the abusive relationship undercurrent happening as you're reading her pages. And in a way, like, it can be kind of heartbreaking because you can see she's noticing the red flags, but she's ignoring the red flags because she's like, oh, but like maybe he'll change. And like one of the ones that like made me kind of like jolt for a second was when she was talking about how Mr. Huntington is mean to like everyone else around him, like the servants and the dogs and even some of his like fellow companions and friends and acquaintances, but like he's always so nice to her. And I'm like, ooh, that's like one of the biggest red flags. So I'm not necessarily looking forward to when it becomes more abusive. So we'll just have to see how that goes. The thing that did get me also is that we found out that Mr. Huntington's first name is Arthur, which is the name of her kid, and I was like, okay, yeah. That I guess that makes sense. I did want to note that I'm actually going to go to New York to visit my best friend, and I'm driving, so that'll be fun and lengthy, but I just don't want to deal with a plane flight right now, just in general. And I'm driving with one of my friends, so that makes it easier because, like, one, you have a companion to talk to through the long drive, and then two, you can kind of switch off driving here and there. So I'm gonna try to vlog some of that. I don't know how far I'm gonna wind up getting with reading while I'm there because I don't know how much downtime there's gonna be other than the car, which I may or may not be able to read in the car, mostly just because I need a really quiet space and I don't want to have to be like, hey, can you please listen to nothing while I read my book? So we'll just have to see how far I get with actual reading. But hopefully it'll be a fun vlog because I'm staying at least in Brooklyn where my friend lives, and then we're gonna also go into Manhattan a couple times, and I think we're even gonna go up to Queens maybe. So there should be some good footage of that. And I'm actually really looking forward to it. I need some time off. I worked like all of Saturday pretty much, and it's just been a lot. So I think it'll be very nice to just take a few days, have fun with friends. Unfortunately, Leo will be boarded, so like that's the only thing I'm dreading is that I hate boarding him. I hate leaving him, period, because look at him. He needs so much. He needs everything and everyone. He's so desperate. You can see it is. Yes. So, yeah, sadly, Leo will be left behind, but it will be good. Oh my gosh. So I did finish The Tenant of Wildfell Hall actually a couple days ago, but I wanted to sit with it and figure out what some of my thoughts were. And I did kind of jot down a couple things in a little journal that I'm going to go over, but I kind of want to focus more on the characters. And first off, there's Helen, who is Mrs. Graham. And obviously, we first meet her as the tenant of Wildfell Hall, and then we get her diaries, and that's when we start to learn more about her background. And the diaries lead all the way up until she meets Gilbert. And at first, Gilbert is very annoyed that he doesn't get to read, like, her thoughts on him. But then he does kind of realize, like, that's actually kind of an invasion of privacy, and, like, maybe I shouldn't be jealous about that. So I did appreciate a little bit of that from Gilbert, but focusing on Helen, I feel like she is a very modern character for her time. I mean, she does do what would probably be unthinkable at that time and separate from her husband due to an abusive situation, and also take the kid with her, who is a male, which of course matters. If it was a daughter, I don't think that it would be so scandalous, because then I don't think that society would be perceiving Helen as taking anything from her husband as much in that scenario. But I mean, she was taking his heir, so like that's everything. But it's really interesting to get to see her character grow, because when we meet her, we're meeting her when she first meets her husband, who is Mr. Huntington, or Arthur. So the relationship between the two of them grows, and when we first meet Arthur, he's very charming and is kind of like not like the other guys, and appreciates Helen for her wit. But then once they get married, about like a year in or so, then you start to see some of Arthur's flaws. And the crazy thing is, and I think I talked about this earlier, where like you're seeing these warning signs, and Helen's just kind of like, oh, I'm just gonna ignore that right now, just because she sees love and her love with Arthur as being very similar to like fairy tales and a very idyllic romance. I feel like seeing him as rescuing her from her other suitor, who was very old and not interesting at all. So you see a little bit of that dynamic there, and I think that kind of speaks a little bit to her innocence and naivete, which is understandable. I mean, she's very young still, and I mean, she's young even when we're at like the present day. You kind of start to see her relationship change with how she views not only Arthur, but also more of how she views relationships and romance by the end, with how she relates to Gilbert. At that point, with Gilbert, it seems more like she is looking for a companion, a partner, a friendship when she's thinking about romance. She's not so worried about material things, which she's able to do that at that point because she's inherited wealth by the time that her and Gilbert get together. So I just thought that was very interesting to see her thoughts and views of marriage and romance change over the course of the novel. But of course, with that, like, it's mostly because Arthur is a terrible person. I would say he would be neglectful. Like, he would like just leave her for weeks and weeks and weeks to go into the city, and barely give any communication about like when he was coming back or anything of relevance. So she was just left to wonder. And I think during that time he was gambling, but he was definitely getting drunk. And that was like his ongoing downfall, was his drunkenness and his gluttonous kind of habits, because it was mostly with alcohol that we really saw the worst of his character. But then also, like, it sounded like he would indulge in, you know, just other types of food and luxuries. So I feel like his character was very much marked by the vice of gluttony, which winds up being his ultimate downfall. He does wind up dying in the novel, so that's why she's able to marry Gilbert. Another thing that he does that is, of course, really terrible is that he does cheat on Helen, and that is when she's just like, okay, I give up. Like, he's never going to change. He's just going to be awful. This is just who he is. Something else we see from Helen that I think is very admirable is also her ability to have compassion for others, and also allow room for forgiveness. Because when Arthur is on his deathbed, she says, like, I don't really forgive you for what you've done to me or to Arthur Jr. and the situation that you put us in. And she's like, I'm willing to maybe even find forgiveness for you if you are someone who is actually worthy of forgiving, and you don't just show it through your words but through your actions too, and you truly do turn your like a leaf over. But if you're not willing to do that, or you don't follow through with that, then I'm not going to forgive you, because you're not truly sorry. And like, that was a really nice thing to see from just pretty much any character. It shows a lot of maturity, and it also shows, again, like a lot of compassion. Like, she's willing to see him still as a person and give him that personhood in her eyes, even though he's been nothing but a monster to her. Still a layer of like rationality. I mean, she knows that like she could still be in danger. This is still her abuser. Like, he doesn't deserve forgiveness unless he actually atones for what he's done and truly becomes a new man. There's some people who would never forgive their abusers, and that's fair. It was interesting to see that point of view in Helen and how she handled that situation. But of course, the other character is also Gilbert, and I did not find him very compelling in the beginning. He, I mean, he grew on me to a sense. Obviously, he's better than Arthur, but I also wanted to see more from him as far as character growth. Like, his big thing with his growth is that he starts the novel with being infatuated with Eliza, who is kind of a town beauty. And he's kind of seeing romance and love through an eyes of seeing a woman as just beauty and attractiveness and not much more. But as he starts to get to know Helen and starts to fall from her, then you see more of him realizing, like, no, like, love and relationships are more about seeing that other person as a person and appreciating their personality and their wit, but also their beauty and all of these other complexities that make up a human being, and not just seeing it as like a surface level thing. That was really refreshing to see from a male character, especially from this time period. I think I just like Helen so much more, and I think she just shows so much more maturity over the novel than Gilbert really does, that I don't quite feel like their romance is truly like earned slash compatible. Like, I wanted to see him grow a little bit more. But I think that's more of my modernist view. I'm not saying that Gilbert wasn't good or that he didn't have redeeming qualities or that he was too unfeminist, especially for the time period. I just didn't really like find his personality that appealing, I think. I don't know what it was, but it didn't quite do it for me. But the book overall is definitely one of my favorites from the Bronte sisters that I've read. I mean, I would say it is my favorite compared to the other two that I've done. I know that Jane Eyre is still probably going to be on top for me, just because, I mean, that will be a reread once that I do that, probably in the winter time. And from what I remember of how I felt when I was reading it, I would still say that that's probably going to be my number one. But this book, I mean, overall, it did surprise me, and I really liked the diary portion. Like, my favorite part was, of course, learning more about Helen and her background, and also just being able to, like, slowly unpeel her backstory through that. I thought that was really fun and engaging, and there's sirens in the background, so I apologize. But it gave it more of a somewhat thriller aspect to it. I wouldn't say it was like a true thriller, but like being able to like solve that mystery and peel back these layers of like how she became the tenant of Wildfield Hall. It's kind of like most of the thoughts I had written down, especially with the character dynamics. I try not to give a ton away. Obviously, I gave away the fact that Gilbert and Helen get together in the end, but there was still a lot of other stuff that happened that I did not go into. And there were a lot of like minor characters that definitely play a role, I'm sure, in other messages and themes of the book that I just didn't really want to talk about, partly because I had a really hard time keeping track of who was who, just because there was a lot of friends of Arthur that had last names that started with H, and I just couldn't keep track of like which one was which, and that kind of messed me up a little bit. But overall, I would say that this book was a success. I did have a moment of a lull with it, but it picked back up and I really enjoyed it. I hope to eventually reread it because I think I would probably find a lot more to it than what I did on this first read, because I'm sure I missed a few things. But as far as like the baseline plot, this is a really good read, and I would definitely recommend it. And hopefully I didn't spoil too much, even though I definitely went over a lot of spoilers. I mean, most of the spoilers. But that's just what I do here. You know, I'm not one to disguise spoilers because I live for spoilers, but that's my fatal flaw. I hope that my footage from Brooklyn and New York came out pretty good. It was a struggle, and I forgot to take photos a lot and even just film things, but I had a lot of fun. And I'm hoping to do another reading vlog again, like in the fall or the winter, give myself a little break from vlogging. It's something that I enjoy, but I do get very tired, and also sometimes I feel like I can't figure out new ways to document things and make ordinary life seem a little bit more interesting, which is kind of the point of me. That's part of my challenge here of vlogging, to try to make the simple things seem a little more than just pouring tea into a pot, even though that's like half of my footage. But yes, so that is all I have, and I thank you so much for joining.